Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and we're going to make a very clean, professional, wet-formed cell phone case. Now, if you're new to leather, this is a little bit more of an intermediate project, but nonetheless, dive in. You're going to make a beautiful phone case, and you're going to pick up some great tricks and tips along the way. Now, on the creative side, I am dying to add some decoration to this, but that's not the point of this video. Let's get the feel for creating our pattern, measuring our phone, and forming our pocket. From there, ample possibilities, and we'll talk about a few of those. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to our website. So let's step over here and look at a very simple pattern. We really only have 3 pieces here to deal with. So what we're going to do is let's look at our digital pick, then we'll come back and explain everything, particularly how to measure for our phone. So digital pick, on our left, that's our backing piece. That's going to be a heavier leather, and we're going to add a clip. On the right, I'm overcutting a piece of 4 to 5 so we can mold and trim to size. On our bottom, simply our strap. So let's start right here on our strap and we'll back up. Now, I love the locks fastener. The reason I like this on a cell phone is because we don't have to press down on it, so we're not worried about our glass. But the problem here is that that's a lot of distance there. I'm just worried that's going to catch on my sleeve or whatnot and dislodge. It's beautiful, and I love these. But let's go with a line 24. We're not really going to have to press down, so again, I'm not too worried about the glass on my phone. Right here, we're going to overcut our 4 to 5 ounce and mold. So therefore, for this phone, I'm going to go about 2 inches each side and about an inch, maybe inch and a half below, because we're going to drop this in to where it sits, there we go, just about the top of our glass. So our glass is protected, but we have a tab there, easy to pull out. Now, with this, how to measure for our phone. This is super easy. Let's drop over to, there we go. On this, I'm going to add 1/2 of an inch to either side. That allows us room for a bend, a stitch line, and 1/8 of an inch outside the stitch line. At the bottom, I'm going to add 1/2 inch. So inch width, 1/2 inch bottom. That's going to be a perfect fit. Now on my phone, this is an iPhone 8, so these dimensions will work for that. But all I'm doing is adding 1/2 of an inch to either side for our stitch line. So that's easy enough. Now on our clip, I love a belt loop on the back because I know my case is not going anywhere. The problem is we have to lace that on, then we have to run our belt through another belt loop. It can be a bit of a problem. We're going to go with a clip. Easy on, easy off, but here's the best part. I put this clip on this sheath, I think 8 to 10 years ago. That is still as strong as the day I put it on. So all told on the clip, not worried about it. Plus, easy on, easy off. Okay, we've explained everything here. Let's step over to our main table, start cutting some leather. Let's start with our pocket first. So we'll cut this, we'll do our edge work, we'll mold it. While that's drying, we'll jump over to the balance of the project. So right here, this is our 6 3/4, 6 3/4. It doesn't have to be exact. What we do want though is a good straight edge across the top. That will be our throat. So with this, 4 to 5 ounce, we might could bump up to a 5 to 6, but that's starting to get a little heavy. I want a nice crisp corner. Now when we start to form, we'll go into our mold because that is just scrap leather. Now we're going black. So an ink pen, no issue. In fact, we could draw all over this and we'd be fine. But let's mark and cut this. Now that's our top edge. That's a good clean cut across here. So our next step, let's groove just along this side. Let's go maybe 2. Give that a good prominent groove line. But we don't want to go too heavy because we'll create a tab. Now let's jump over to a number 1 4 to 5 ounce. So a number 1 Master Tools edger. Let's just edge front and back. Now last step here. Let's wet our edge and slick. Good, that feels good. The camera won't see it, but it's rounded, it's slicked, and we've got a good gloss to that. All right, one last step. let's drop in our hole. Now we're going to use a line 24 snap, so I'm going to bump up to probably about the 4th tube up. And we are ready to mold. So I'm going to reset here. Let's get this piece molded. Let's talk about our mold first, because this can really be simple. It sounds complicated. It isn't. We're going to make our own mold. We're going to use scrap leather to do that. Now my phone, 5/8 of an inch thick. So therefore I want to go about 3/4 of an inch thick on my mold, just so my phone isn't too tight in my case. But again, that is just scrap leather. In fact, there's another pouch pocket, scrap leather. Same thing there. Now, this is cool, and I'm dying to go this route. We can always drop in an additional design on top of our mold that will mold in at the same time we actually mold our pocket. I am dying to add something to this. Not the point of this video. Let's keep it simple. We can go here next. But also, all kinds of ways we can make simple molds. But we're going to actually use our fingers, and you'll be surprised how easy and how clean this is going to come out. So let's take our 4 to 5, drop it in our water, and I want to give that maybe just about 15 seconds. Let that water wick in nicely. Good. Now I can feel it's become very pliable. So let's lay this on our table, and let's just maybe give that about, let's say 5 minutes, let that water wick thoroughly. We've got some good dry time, and I can feel the leather is extremely pliable. That's what we're looking for. Now, when we go to mold, a couple of things we want to watch out for. First off, fingernail marks. Yeah, it's probably a good idea to trim your fingernails. But also, right here on my mold, right there, our hole, our snap hole is 1 inch down, so 1 inch from the throat, centered on my block. So what I'll do is let's take this hole, line that up right there. Very good. And I want that flush and even across that line. So now let's take our fingers and we're going to start pressing down on this mold. There we go. And we're going to keep working this for just a minute or two. But look at that. That corner's already starting to come into focus. Very nice. So I'm going to work this for a couple minutes. Then we're going to walk away. We'll come back in about an hour, work it a little more, then leave it and let it dry. One thing we want to watch out for, it's really easy because we're concentrating on our mold for this line to slip a little bit left and right. So what I'm going to do is keep an eye on that. But at the same time, I'm going to hold down the mold or the leather on the mold as I work around. Okay, so I've worked it a good bit. How about that? That looks good. And again, just with our fingers. We can always use a tool, but the problem is just about everything has a hard edge on it. And if we force the bend in with that, we're going to have marks everywhere we drop in that tool. So all told, my hands seem to work just fine. Okay, so let's give this, let's say maybe about 45 minutes. I'm going to come back, work it again, then we'll set it aside and let it dry. Let's start with our main body or our backing panel. This is going to be an 8 to 9 ounce. This is our strap double shoulder, and I love these. Now I've just cut a smaller piece out just to make it easier. But look at the flesh side on that leather. That's a hallmark of a quality tannage. So with this, let's drop in our pattern, and let's mark this with our pen and cut. Good. On our round corners, we don't necessarily have a tool for this, but we can cut these by hand and they're going to look good. All I'm going to do is on my ink line is make a bunch of just small, easy cuts. And you'll see these are going to be beautiful round corners. Good. Look at that. Looks like it was cut with a round corner tool. Okay, let's mark for our holes. Now we've got 2 rivet holes, but then we've got an oblong right here. Now I can mark for that, and I can usually get it pretty parallel with our throat, but let's make it a little bit easier. Let's put a mark on both sides. We'll use a 1 inch oblong on that, but now we can make sure that's clean and square. So on our throat, just like our pocket, right across the top and the top only, let's drop in a good groove line. And we're going to jump over to a number 2 bevel, since this is an 8 to 9, a little bit thicker. Good. All right. Let's do this. Let's reach all the way over here because somebody forgot to get their water close at hand. Well, let's take our water and we're going to slick across our throat only. That looks good, feels good. So we're going to jump over to our table. We can punch with our revolving, but I won't get my revolving down here, so we'll just use a drive punch. Let's jump over for our strap. We're going to go back to our 4 to 5 ounce, and I've got a wooden strap cutter, and I've set this at 3/4 of an inch. Whoop, there we go. Good. Now we want 7 inches here. So let's trim the size, square on one end. Here we go. And let's groove and bevel with a number 1 bevel here. That looks good. Now let's wet and slick just like we did on our main body. That looks good. Now let's just mark one end because what we're going to do is rivet this on. Check for our length to make sure we've got a good fit. So let's just mark right there. Very good. Let's step over to our punch table, drop in some holes, a round end, and an oblong. On our main strap, again, we're simply going to rivet this on and then we're going to check for our distance. That'll be a good fit. So all we really need there is a good round end punch, 3/4 inch. Now when we jump over here, for our oblong here, we can go with a 1 inch. I tend to like a 7/8 of an inch because it makes that just a little bit tighter, but that's a bit of an obscure size. So let's just go with our 1 inch, line up between our holes. Oh, there we go. Those 2 holes, those 2 marks, made that so easy to make that a good, clean, parallel punch. So right here, we can always get to this with a revolving, but since we're here, let's use one of our master tools, and this is a 1/8 of an inch. It's going to be a good size for a rivet hole. There we go. Okay, we are punched. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and punch while we're here. Right there. Nice. Let's step back over to our main table. Strap, backing, ready to go. Let's take our mold out. Now, this is starting to dry a little bit, but all told, we're going to need to give this about 8 hours dry time. We want this completely dry before we move forward. But all told, could not be happier with that mold. That looks good. All right, let's give this ample dry time. We'll move on from there. We've had ample time to dry. In fact, it worked out to where I had overnight to dry. That looks good. You know, if I saw this in a store, I would be hard pressed to say that that was done by hand. So with this, how's our fit? Good. Now, we've gone a little bit wider than our phone and a little bit deeper. The point there is that we're going to draw our sides in just a little bit when we glue this onto our main body. So it's going to tighten a little bit. But what I don't want to have to do is every time I draw myself, I have to reach around my body, hold my case to draw myself. So again, we've got a little room for error here. Now, our first step, we're going to trim our pocket. What I want to do is trim this pocket right about 5/16 or 8 millimeters. We're going to trim right down both sides across the bottom, and we've got a cool trick to where we can match our corner. So let's just do our best because again, this is not a perfect technique. There we go. And new knife because it's going to be a big help. There we go to draw that across and make one cut. Good. That looks good. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. There we go. Okay, let's trim that just a little bit further. Good. Now on our corners, we want to match the corners on our main body. So what I'm going to do is make an inside corner template. Let's see if I can find a pen. There we go. Hate to do that. Should have been more prepared. So what I can do is just drop this template in. Let's get a better camera shot. There we go. Drop that in. And let's mark that corner. Same on the other side. Okay, let's do our best to cut this corner just like we did on our main body. A small cut. That's going to fit nicely. Now, I've got a little bit of ink there. Well, the point here is we're going black, and black cures all sins. No kidding. Okay, let's step over here. What we're going to do is I'm going to take a sanding block. Maybe not totally necessary, but what I want to do is I want to rough all the way around about 1/4 of an inch so our glue is going to stick better than it would on our top grain. We don't have to go far in, but let's just rough that edge. Okay, so on our glue, love the S18, love the barge. In fact, that's what the shoe and saddle folks go to. I like the S18 mainly because it comes in a smaller can. So let's start right here. I'm going to add my contact cement all the way around on both pieces. Good, there's our backing piece. Got a little overzealous in our corner there, but nobody's ever going to see that. So over to our pocket, we're going to do the same thing. And I'm really just going to come in to about the inside of my bin. That's really all we need. Good, now our white glue will work, but again, we're going to dye before we sew. So I really like the contact cement, but at the same time, when this goes together, it stays together. So I'm going to give that about 5 minutes, let that glue wick in and set. Good dry time. Now we know this is cut to size, so we're going to work our pocket to meet our backing. Let's start right at the top. I'm going to meet that corner. There we go. Let's bring that in a little bit as we move around our corner. Good. Across our bottom. Again, let's try to get those two edges to meet as well as we can. And then up here, let's pull this out just a little bit. Get those corners to meet. Now, little short right here. So let's take our square, and I'm just going to push that edge out a little bit. Now it meets well. And the same on the other side. It's just drawn up a little bit where we're going around our corner. And there we go. So we've got a good meet all the way around. Now right here, I can trim this corner just a hair if I need to, simply by putting that upside down on the edge of my cutting table. Nice, fitting together very well. Again, on our corners, if they're not just perfect, what I can do is just run my block around that corner, and I might even do that on my edge a little bit. Good, nice meat all the way around. So let's do this. Let's take our groover. Now you'll notice this typically has an arm that's about 1.5 inches long. It's adjustable. But notice how I've trimmed that right to the edge because I need a groove. That arm would not let me do that. So I'm going to drop in a groove line right about 1/8 of an inch on all 3 sides. Very nice. Okay, let's jump over, drop in our chisel line. When we're dropping in our chisel line, we can always start on one side and just work our way around. I'm a little worried about coming up too long or too short on this side. So what we'll do is we'll start on both sides and just meet in the middle at the bottom. Now we can always use our 6-tine. We'll really mow through some distance there. But the problem is not so much going through, it's coming back out. So with my 4-tine, we've got an incoming groove line coming across the top of our throat. I'm going to drop my 1st tine right against that groove line. Now when I strike this tool, in a perfect world, straight up and down is great. We can lean out just a little bit, that's fine. The one thing we want to avoid is leaning in. Our tines run the risk of coming out of the side of our leather. So let's drop that in. I've got tines across, so now I'm going to put my finger in. There we go, and just work this out very slowly. I don't want to separate the glue. Now if we do, we're okay, because once we get this together, the stitch holds it and not the glue. So 1st tine, last hole. I've got tines across the bottom. Now it's easy enough to work that out. Now when we get to our corner, there we go. What we can do is let's take our 2-tine. And I'm just going to hit that lightly, so now I know exactly where that next tine is. Let's do it again, and let's just work our way around our corner until we get back to our straight. So now I can take a single tine, Much easier in and out, but also that curve is going to be very clean. And now we've got a consistent distance between our chisel holes in our corner. So I'm going to work flat to about the center. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And down to our bottom. So let's double check. Notice we've got a little bit of extra distance there. So we're going to squeeze in one tine between these last two. Now I could always mark this and bring one tine in and get each a little bit closer. But all told, that's going to look pretty good. And really, we will never see that. So there we go. Let's drop one tine in between. There we go. It may be a little bit shorter, but we'll never see that. All right, back to our main table. Let's knock out our edges. With our edges, we can always sand a little bit if we need to. I just don't want to chew up too much distance between my edge and my chisel line. So let's start right here. Number one, we've got a 4 to 5 ounce on our face. So let's use a number 1 here. Then we're going to flip this over. We're going to use a number 2 for our backing. Good. Okay, so we're on our way to a nice edge. Let's wet the 3 sides. Now, when we go to slick, we're a little bit wider than this top groove. But right up top, we've got a rounded edge. Same at the bottom. So what I can do is I can slick from the back, get that edge rounded. Then I can slick from the front and get that edge rounded. Now, if I've got too little distance here, I can always flip over to this side. There we go. That's looking good already. And our back side, again, I don't know if we can see that gloss, but it looks good, feels good. We're ready to die. So what I'm going to do is reset here. Let's drop some dye on our cell case. I typically dip dye. In fact, I dip dye most everything, but we're going to go with black. So consistency, not really an issue. Also, we're going to use the Pro Dye. Now, I'd love to have the camera or the bottle in the camera shot, but yeah, that's not exactly ready for the camera. I use a lot of black and I love it. So we're going to go with simply a dauber. We can always use one of our dressing sponges, but a dauber, easy enough. So let's dip, and then let's dye the entire piece. We're going to dye outside and our inside. When we get to our inside, let's get our dauber full of dye, and we're going to press that down into our seams. So therefore, that dye is going to sink down in there. Now, one more point. Because we've wet formed this, our edges, where we've pressed this down, the pores have closed on that leather. So what I'd like to do is let's add another good coat right across the face, and particularly on our bend. Well, that looks good. All right, so let's do our strap. Then we're going to give these both some dry time. And that looks good. Okay, let's give this maybe 3 hours dry time. We've had plenty of dry time. I can feel it, quite dry. Now we're going to take an extra step here. We're going with a Pro Dye, so rub off, greatly reduced. But at the same time, we're going with black. This is notorious for rubbing off. So let's take an extra step. I keep a rag in a baggie in my shop that's lightly oiled, just in a baggie so it doesn't evaporate. But here I'm going to clean my leather. Now I'm not oiling so much as simply cleaning. So let's clean all sides. That looks good. Now all told, for black dye, that's not bad. I love the Pro Dye. But nonetheless, our edges, that's typically where the worst rub-off's going to come from. So let's jump over to our leather balm. I have 2 rags. I'm going to apply with one, I call this my wet rag, and buff with a dry rag. Well, that looks good. We can absolutely drop leather balm on our back. That's going to help with rub-off as well. On a cell case, it's not really that big of an issue. So now let's just buff as best we can. And our edges, we're basically continuing to burnish these. Let's see if I can get, yeah, there we go. We can get the camera shot on that. Well, that looks pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing to the strap. Well, that looks good. Both body and strap, very happy with both. So let's step over to our pattern table, knock in a really pretty white stitch line. We're going to do a basic saddler stitch, but before we go there, I had some gum trag or gum tragicant in our previous shot. I forgot to use it. Well, all told, in my defense, we've slicked both with water and then with our leather balm. So all told, in this situation, I don't really think the gum trag is necessary, but I do love it, and it's a great product. Makes slicking our edges very easy. So let's jump over to our sewing. I'm going to use the John James needles, the number 18. Love this needle. It's the smallest of the three. And our thread, this is our Ritza Tiger thread. This is the 0.8 millimeter. I like it because it's going to stand out. It's going to be a nice touch on our black cell case. Now, I will typically go 4 times my length. But here's the problem. We're going through black. So therefore, the front end of our thread is going to pick up some dye. So let's give that ample room. We can clip that off. It's going to look great. Now, up at the throat, we're going to do a double loop because we need strength right up here. So let's start in our second hole. Let's come through, equal out our thread length. There we go. Now I'm going to take this needle, left needle or right, whichever. I'm going to come back through my first hole. Now on my second, I'm going to come back through my second hole, but what I want to do is I want to pull this thread back. That's going to open the hole, but at the same time, I'm not worried about splitting that thread. So let's bring that back through. There we go. Now back through the first and back through the second again. That gives us our double loop. Good. Okay. This is a little bit thick. I typically run both needles at one time. Let's see if I can here. Yeah, we've got a 4 to 5 and an 8 to 9. This gets a little bit tough. So what we can do, same thing we did from the beginning. In fact, let me back up right here on our thread or our stitch. Let's pull that just enough to where I can see that sink just a little bit down. So when we go to one needle, let's pull one through and then pull that back, opening up that hole. There we go. The second needle slips right through. Now we can add our tension. It's a little bit slower, but it's a lot less stress on our fingers. So I'm going to sew all the way around to the very last hole. We'll do a double loop on the other side. And we're down to our last hole, so let's give that some tension. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to take my front needle and I'm going to lift up on my face just a little bit. So therefore I can slide that through, there we are, just through the front ply. So let's tighten that down. I'm going to do the same thing with the back. Let's pull that through and pull that taut. Now right here in the end, let's see if I'm going to put this in. This will make perfect sense. So basically I've got a left and a right, and it doesn't really matter which is which. But let's do this. Let's take our right, circle over our left, loop around it. Now I'm going to take the end of my finger and I'm going to press that down in there, pull that knot tight. Good. Now let's take our left, circle over our right, and do the same thing. Good. That knot not only is tucked down in there, but it's going to be very secure. So let's do this. This is part of the knife that we never use. So what I'm going to do is put that right down in there, and I'm going to pull the thread over the knife. Good. Let's tuck those two pieces down in there. Now I can take a little awl and press that thread down in there, but for the most part, we can't even see that. We've got a good knot inside. All we have left now is jump over to our punch table. We're going to knock this together. We could always knock our hardware on before we get to assembly, but that raises all kinds of problems. We have to die it, then drop in our hardware, then glue, chisel, sew. This is so much easier, and a couple of simple tricks makes this work. So we're going to go with a line 24 snap. So on the front, we're going to take our base, the naked back, and the flange on the inside. You'll notice we've got an outside flange and an inside flange. So let's start right here on the face. There we go. Now we could do this in reverse, where we drop in our clip first, but it makes it hard to nail down our snap. So let's take our inside flange, drop that in. Now we've got a setter. This comes with our 4-piece snap set. So let's drop that in. And behind that, I've just got a piece of 8 to 9, just basically as a riser. So let's take our line 24 snap setter. There we go. One more. Notice it's spinning just a little bit. Let's give that, there we are, just enough to keep that from spinning. Well, that looks good thus far. Okay, let's flip this over. So we're going to go to our clip. Now what I need to do here, let's just open that up with our finger, and that's going to slide right through our oblong and down. Look at that. I can see that hole perfectly. So with this looks a little tricky, but it's really not. We're going to use a double cap rivet. So I'm going to take my rivet and a pair of needle nose, and let's just slide that down in. There we go. Pops right in. Let's press down on our case. I'm going to take my cap and snap that on the rivet. Love the double caps because I can snap that down without setting it. So on this, let's take this. We're going to flip this over because the bottom end of that rivet's hanging down in there. So let's drop in our anvil and then drop in our spacer. So that's going to sit right under that rivet. Now, I don't want to set this where it is because we're going to crush our cap. So let's let our snap, or crush our snap. So let's let that hang off the side. I can feel I'm on that anvil. Let's take our rivet setter. Set that good and hard. There we go. So our clip is in. Easy enough thus far. Let's jump back over to a medium double cap. Now these are our antique nickel. Beautiful. Let's drop that through, and we're going to drop our strap on. Let's get our rivet cap, snap that down. Now, same thing, let's take our anvil and our riser, but now let's let that hang off the side. Now, if that's a little tough to do, we can always take basically just about anything. In fact, we're going to use some sponge. Now, my rivet's right on top of my anvil, so let's set this. Good. All right, let's take our phone. Going to slide this down in there. Wow, nice fit. Let's bring this around and let's mark that to where it's going to sit on our snap. So now we can make a pattern out of this. Let's take our revolving punch. We're going to put the other part of our line 24. So let's punch a hole there. Let's bring out our punch board. There we go. Let's take our 3/4 inch round. Now, we can go out as much as we want, but I'd like to put a little tab on this that makes it a little easier to grab. So let's come out maybe 3/4 of an inch, just right. A little more or a little less is no problem. But now we've got a naked part on that. So let's take our Sharpie, color that in. Good. Let's take our board back out. And now, the front end of our line 24. So let's push that through. And our anvil, let's flip that over. This inset right here is for our line 24. Just enough to where that doesn't spin. Very good. Let's drop in our phone. Look at that. That is one good looking cell case. That is going to last for years. We now have the feel for a wet molded cell case. Nothing difficult. But now the fun part. How are we going to decorate these? Stamping, tooling, spots, edge lacing. How about 1 or maybe 2 Mexican basket weaves? That would be gorgeous. I hope every cell phone case you make is a spot-on perfect fit, looks great, and lasts for years. Good luck with your projects.